guess is that the adult content, the more adult content in Battlestar, the more serious themes that go on. How do you figure that adds to the show as opposed to like not being handled in Star Trek so much? I mean, that's kind of the dynamic, the difference that I can see.
Adult content in what?
I think you know.
Before I say anything, I want to know exactly what you're talking about.
It's amazing that you answered that call.
I think specifically the one thing that my friends and I got into a big debate about was the inclusion of the rapes, like, in the plot lines. That was a major issue between me and my friends. Like, was that too much? Was that enough? What does that do to sci-fi?
Well, I think it reflects real life. I think that why our show is so generally accepted and why it is so good is the writers really have a real strong endeavor to reflect what's going on in the world today. And all of those things that happen in our show happen in the world every single day. Oftentimes television is really bound to not hold up that mirror. And we've been given a lot of leeway by being on a cable network, for one, and by Sci-Fi being so generous to the writers and just saying, you know, guys, you pretty much have carte blanche. And they dial it in a little bit from time to time, but I assure you that rape scene, what made it on TV is nothing even close to what we shot. And Tomo can talk about it too. I mean, it was horrifying to run into that room, and because they basically went to the end of the scene. But what you saw was it not really even happening yet. It was the inference of what was about to happen. And that was enough for the studio. They said, no, let's just infer what's going to happen here. But that goes on every day. And I think that adult content is, I think that's what people really embrace. Some people can't watch it. I understand that. I mean, it's hard to watch. A lot of the stuff's really hard to watch. Wait for season 3.
Can't wait.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I watched the first few episodes of season 3 and just want to turn it off. I would go back to The Simpsons, you know. I'll watch my Family Guy any day.
You're showing the deleted scenes, aren't you? That was it. Real quick, I just want to say real fast, you know, Star Trek, when it came out, was dealing with provocative themes. So, in a sense, you can't compare those two eras. For that time, Star Trek was really on the cutting edge, going into themes that none of the traditional, you know, shows were covering. And one of the things about science fiction is they were always able to deal with that kind of more controversial subject matter and get away with it because it was a little less threatening, because it was in a sci-fi show. So, in a sense, you know, they share a lot more in common than you would think. They were provocative then, and this Battlestar here is very much about mirroring what's going on in the world, but doing it, I think, in a very ingenious way by putting a twist on it that forces you, the audience, to step into the other guy's shoe, the guy that you normally judge, the guy you normally think is the bad guy, and now, in a sense, you've got to look through their eyes. And speaking of bad guys...
Thank you very much, thank you.
Yes. I take the fifth. That's what they say out here. No, I think that in a way, everything is a product of something else, and in some fashion also a reaction too. So that I got the feeling watching Star Trek that I absolutely loved and watching. I was watching heroes. I was watching people do the right thing, and I seem to remember it was. You know, it was embodied by Kirk's kind of philosophy. You know, we're human beings. That's, and I think in Battlestar, basically, we just turned it on its head. I can't imagine Battlestar Galactica, what we're doing now, going out in the 70s. I mean, if it had been shown to one of those executives, they'd have been like, yeah, you've lost your job. We're not showing this thing. So, we're kind of a product from that, and in a sense of, I think one of the things we were ranging against all of the time is that the heroes are perhaps not as heroic as they might be, which is a comment on our times.
Well, and the heroes are human. That's the thing about Battlestar, is that everyone's fallible and yet heroic. I mean, people are surviving in those times and bringing the dysfunctionality of relationships to space and the realness of these relationships and the intimacy of these relationships and the tragedy of what happens between human beings makes it, as a viewer, easier to personalize the experience of watching what could and most likely will be our future going up into space. I mean, this show, we could be living this show in a matter of, you know, a couple of decades. We could all be up in space. I mean, eventually we will be. And the thing about this show for me as a viewer, because I love watching it, it could happen to us. And it feels so human. It feels so possible. And that's like the watching a train wreck. You kind of have to watch it, but you don't want to watch it. But it could happen to you.
I was just thinking, because of what you were just saying, that Star Trek is kind of like, it really is a space odyssey. And in the sense, I'm always thinking about our show, you know, God forbid actually what happens in our show happens to the world. So they're slightly different in the sense of Battlestar Galactica, I think, is like a cautionary tale. It's the big finger kind of pointing out like, no, well, we've already totally screwed up our society. And because of it, we're now refugees living in space. Everybody here watching it has a chance to, like one person at a time, change the world for the better. And if anything, you know, by holding up this mirror to nature, what we're trying to do, I think, is not too grand a thing, affect political consciousness on this level. We want you to think about it, because we're all killing each other. It's we live in a crazy, crazy place right now. And the thing is, Battlestar is just one step beyond where we are headed. So
people always talk about how dark the show can be, but I mean, if you really watch it, if you're a true fan, you also realize it's very much about hope, the human struggle. And as flawed as these creatures are, regardless of what they've been through, they always move on because they have to.
Does anybody else need a drink?
Douglas has been talking about this all night. Get the man a drink.
You know, a lot of people talk about the adult content of the show, and sometimes that's just a willingness to be realistic, because on Star Trek for a long time in fandom, people said, well, where's the bathroom? I think the general feeling of the writing staff is we're simply chronicling these people's lives. And people in the real world, they have sex, they go to the bathroom, they do a lot of things we never see on TV, and it's just, we're willing to show it on Galactica.
I would add to that one of the things that I think Galactica does brilliantly is that it deals with issues that we normally don't think about as being polite. Religion, sex, politics, the things you're not supposed to talk about at a dinner party, make great television. And, you know, and more network executives should pay attention to that, because it's real and it's vital, as Kevin just said. Sorry, blanked on your name for a second. I remembered without it. Anyway, so I think that what's amazing about, yeah, probably will help me. About Star Trek is, you know, if you want to, I think of Deep Space Nine as baby Galactica. You know, that's where Ron Moore really started experimenting with a lot of these themes. You know, religion, politics, sex are all in Deep Space Nine. And it was not considered, there are a lot of Star Trek fans who don't consider that real Star Trek because it wasn't optimistic. Optimism is not the same as Pollyanna. You know, you can be optimistic about the way that you confront these real world challenges. And I think that's where Star Trek needs to move next. Star Trek doesn't have to become Galactica in order to be good Star Trek, but it can certainly learn about freeing itself from the constraints that I think ultimately strangled Star Trek.